everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of A Sip of Knowledge with Marty Duffy, Liz Rhoades, and Lou Bryson, plus this week's special guest, Brent Elliott, the Master Distiller at Four Roses, who I will let your host give you a more formal introduction to in just a moment. Real quick, before we get started, I'm Will Hookinga from Savvy.co, and just want to point out a few ways to interact with your hosts and their guests if this is your first time joining us. So to your right, you'll see a chat box. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're tuning in from. If you have a question at any point for Brent or any of our hosts, there's a little button at the bottom that says Ask a Question. Put your question in there. I'll be keeping an eye on those and sending them over to your hosts here. And last but not least, feel free to invite your friends to join us. There's a share button that lets you do that pretty easily at the top of your screen. But with all that said, Marty, Lou, Liz, I will turn things over to y'all now.
Thank you, Will. You know what we always say, where there's Will, there's a Wi-Fi, because that's the only time I ever see it. All right. Welcome, everyone, to another week of A Sip of Knowledge. I'm Martin Duffy. I'm a former master of whiskey for Diageo. Plus, I represented Benedictine for 18 glorious months nationally, actually mostly out of my front room. And then
Frisco cocktails later.
Woohoo! Oh, Frisco. I love Frisco.
Frisco's great.
And then 8 years as the co-producer in the Chicago Independent Spirit Expo. For the last 6 years, I have had the honor of being the sole North American representative for the Glencairn whiskey glass. Somebody doesn't have their whiskey glass in front of them. Yeah, there you go.
Nice.
Hold
Wi-Fi cheers.
Very nice.
All right.
Thank you, though. I need to work on that.
Lizard, who the heck are you?
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm really excited to have Brent on the show, so thanks for joining us, Brent. I'm Liz Rhoades, a technical distiller and spirit consultant. Have just over a decade of experience in alcoholic beverage, spanning across beer, rum, vodka, but my specialty and heart is in whiskey. I spent most of my career at Diageo, but now I'm currently founder and principal at Spirit Safe Consulting. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about my little firm, my little venture, if you go into About the Host section, there is a link to my website. So, Lou?
Thank you, Liz. Welcome, Brent. And thank you, as always, Marty, for the intro. My name is Lou Bryson. I am a whiskey and beer writer. Currently have my new book that I'm plugging, Whiskey Masterclass. Still out this year, so I can still call it new.
Page 261 is really
really riveting.
A little personal. I was the managing editor of Whiskey Advocate magazine for 20 years. I freelance now. I'm a spirits or drinks writer, senior drinks writer for the Daily Beast. Just had a piece out on limited edition whiskeys that are dropping this fall. I am drinking one of those today. I have the Boss Hog 7, and I don't ordinarily make a big deal of these things, but unique wood finishing, and this is just waves of spice that are killing me today. I love this. I had to bring it along. So,
look at you.
Hey.
If all you out there, if you haven't guessed yet, our special guest today is quite special. You're probably the most respectable guest we've had on so far, Brent.
Uh-oh.
The rest have been scallywags, ne'er-do-wells. But you are you're not only the master of whiskey, the master distiller of Four Roses Distillery, but you are only one of a small handful of master distillers who've ever been the master distiller at Four Roses. So you followed Jim Rutledge after many, many years, and now you've taken over the realm for the last 5. Give us an idea of how you got from A to the glorious B that you're at right now. little journey.
Yeah, it all kind of started just with me realizing that what I was doing, with my background in chemistry, that sort of thing, that I could get involved in the whiskey industry. It hadn't really occurred to me before, but I was in Tennessee and I came up and I took a tour of Woodford Reserve. And that was on a Saturday. The very next day, I went back to Tennessee, got online, and I found a posting for a job. Didn't say where, just at a distillery in Kentucky, straight bourbon whiskey. Having grown up in Kentucky, I went to school in Lexington, UK. I've always been, kind of proud as Kentucky bourbon. Always fascinated by it. Always enjoyed it as a product. So I just I applied. Then a week or so, I was up interviewing at Four Roses, which when I was doing my research, I thought it was Wild Turkey because I found out it was in Lawrenceburg. And at the time, I didn't know what Four Roses was because we went back in the U.S. This is 2005.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I remember talking to the recruiter. Like she was, we had a few conversations, and she was just dropping a little bit of information each time. So first call, she told me kind of what the position was. The second call, she mentioned Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. So between the second call and the third call, I did some research. And I was digging a little deeper, and so I came up Wild Turkey. So the third call, I was like, all right, we can stop the charade. I know we're talking about Wild Turkey. She's like,
oh, they must still talking about that.
So actually, it's Four Roses. And so then I had to do some research on Four Roses. But I came up and I took a tour. And that was, we'd just come back to the U.S. a few years prior to that. We've been sold as a bourbon internationally from the late 50s up until 2002. We were only back in the U.S. We had very few people in management at the Lawrenceburg facility. So I came in, I met Jim, John Ray, Al, Joe Tanaka, a bunch of people that, actually just about everyone. And, I fell in love with the place, with the people, the product. And that was the first time I tried the product too. The night before, on my way up to the interview, I bought a bottle of single barrel. And
nice.
Yeah, so
interview prep, right? Like,
yeah.
That's research, honey. I'm doing research over here.
The best time.
But yeah, so I started up, and actually I got my foot in the door just because I had a lot of experience running a GC mass spec, which was kind of the big instrument they had bought to build the whole laboratory around. Okay. And that was under the quality control department, which was one person at the time. And so I started out just doing analysis. And then I pitched in, I started doing blending, barrel selections, working with Jim, John, Al. And because we were spread so thin, I had the opportunity to do just about anything I wanted. I was pitching in everywhere. And so I just kind of grew with the company. And, fast forward 10 years, we had gone from just selling whiskey in Kentucky to, for the U.S., from Kentucky, we were nationwide. We had grown at, high double digits year after year. So it was a totally different environment from when I started in 2010. And that was when Jim announced that he was going to retire. And honestly, I never had thought, of course, I sort of daydreamed about the possibility of becoming master distiller because, who wouldn't want to be? I love the job. I love the company, the brand. But I also never thought Jim would retire, but he'd always joked.
You were constantly fiddling with his ladders and stuff, weren't you? You were cutting one leg shorter than the other.
Hey, he's not going to retire.
But yeah, he surprised everybody. He decided to retire, and it got to the point where people wouldn't even listen to him because he talked about retirement so much. But then he actually did. And I remember I was called into the CEO's office, and she said, told me a few things. First was that Jim was retiring, which was, enough. That was a bomb anyway. And then she said, and you're going to be the next master distiller. It wasn't a question. I guess she knew. And honestly, the first thing that went through my mind, because when I'd sort of play the scenario over my head, I wouldn't allow myself to think about it too much. But when I did, I'd always think, I don't know, sour grapes was like, I couldn't do that. I couldn't talk in front of people like Jim does. I'm mortified of public speaking. I couldn't do it. So when she said that, it's like, well, I guess I'll have to try. Might last 2 months, 3 months. I'll see what kind of a run I can give it this thing. But turns out if you know your material, which I guess I didn't know when I publicly spoken in the past, I was kind of winging it. Makes all the difference. You know what you're talking about.
Practice,
yeah. A little bit easier. Yeah.
Did you?
So that was kind of my journey. That's kind of how I got to where I am. In a nutshell, I just kind of grew with the company. You know, I got in at the right time.
Yeah, it's a hell of an abrupt last step, though.
Yeah. I mean, because even Jim didn't work at Four Roses his entire. He was a distiller for 50 years, but he didn't start at Four Roses until about 96. But he worked for Seagram's as a distiller since 66. So he
did a lot of different things with
right?
Seagram. He was up in New York for a while. He was working with inventory management, all sorts of different aspects of production. But yeah, when he came back in 95 or 96, that was as a distiller.
Yeah.
So he was here for
20
years.
No, I was just thinking, it sounds like I'm sure you learned so much from him. Is there anything that stands out as one of those like aha moments or something that you learned from him that really, helped guide you forward?
It's hard to really pinpoint one thing. It's probably more of just the attitude.
Okay.
He just paid attention to every detail. Cared so much about what he was doing, and also, because you've got sort of two sides of the modern distillery. You've got the side that I referred to as the work side, then you have the PR side, which is meeting people, thinking about it. And that's doesn't seem challenging, but when I saw how he would interact with people and make time to explain or talk to a group, whether it's 300 people or 2 people, he would spend, put everything he had to answer all their questions for as long as it took. And that always, when I think of, my memories of Jim, in the distillery, at work, or with the public, I always remember that, and that always left an impression on me. I think that really, people appreciate that so much. These things that we do every day that we take for granted, getting to share that experience or that knowledge with people. He understood the importance of that, and I think he helped me recognize that.
Yeah, because a master distiller. I mean, the whole idea of the celebrity of being a master distiller really didn't start taking off until maybe the late 90s, Lou. I don't know. I mean,
that was all about Whiskey Fest.
Yeah, you got a bunch of guys.
I joke a little bit, but I think that had a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Because that's when those guys really stepped out from behind the Wizard of Oz curtain, and we found out they actually were wizards. Which was
pay no attention to that man behind that giant copper kettle.
But yeah, I mean, until that, I think people didn't even know who the hell they were. I remember the first, 10 years, I'd actually have to say, when I said Jimmy Russell, Master Distiller, Wild Turkey, or Jim Rutledge, he's the Master Distiller for, and now, they know everybody.
There was a huge announcement for the new distiller for
Jack Daniels.
I mean, it was like rolling out a carpet. There was a lot of you saw bloggers saying, "Hey, stick with us tonight when the big announcement is made." And it's like, okay, and then you're like,
of course, I also got a really huge press release for when Russian Standard Vodka got released in Nigeria. So some of this stuff gets overblown.
Right.
To your point, though, it's not just a bourbon thing. It's not just a U.S. thing. It's very much global across many different products, many different.
Yeah, who the hell knew who Richard Patterson was 20 years ago?
Or the master. I mean, the first guys I recognized were the Scottish guys. They brought in a lot of old Scottish distillers, mostly retired, in the early and mid 90s as brand ambassadors. They were the real first brand ambassadors, but they were all retired. But they were former distillers. But it wasn't. I mean, it took a while for, especially Kentucky, the bourbon guys to really rise. But when they did, they became legendary.
They were unstoppable. Yeah.
I mean, Jimmy Russell, the guy is he's a little train that could. The really old train that could.
Yeah.
So Brent,
I'm telling you better watch out for him. Like I said, I think this COVID year has re-energized him. No, he's been running all around. He's all fired up again.
How much of your job now is obviously not this year, but say prior, how much of it is going out and doing all the PR stuff and shaking hands, and how much of it is just getting your hands dirty?
It's hard to say. It goes in spurts. It typically, in a given month, on average, I might be out of the distillery between 3 and 7 days on average. Fortunately, a lot of the events I do are local, so I can still be in the distillery all day and then go to Louisville or Lexington for an evening event. But there are certain, I have a handful of big trips each year that could be 3 days to a full week where I'm hitting a focus market somewhere. And that's the biggest challenge, is try to balance that out so that I'm not gone for too long. I'm one for work, and I've got, family. I have 2 young kids, so I don't want to be away too much. So, again, that's the biggest challenge I have, is maintaining that balance so everything is spread out kind of evenly and doesn't be all at once.
Now, when you first took the job, when you started working at the distillery back in 2005, did you start thinking, hey, you know what, I might become pretty well known for working at this distillery? I mean, did that thought even cross your mind? Because, a lot of guys who work at distilleries think they're just going in, like if you worked at a tuna can plant or something, it's just a job. But then this whole focus on whiskey and distilleries and distillers has really kind of blown things up quite a bit.
Yeah. It occurred to me. And I even sort of fantasized about that or thought about that when I was going through the interview process. But I didn't really.
All right. Honesty at last. No, I never thought of that. It was all about the whiskey.
Yeah, I thought that would be the coolest thing ever. But honestly, I didn't let myself believe that, or like that didn't hint or influence my decision. And I'd never had that drive me. I never hung my hat on it. Again, I never thought Jim would retire, and even if he did, he could still be going, till 2030. Knowing him, and so when you're looking that far out, it's like, well, I didn't allow myself to really dwell on that too much. But of course, I didn't think about it, but I didn't dwell on it.
You didn't dwell on it.
I mean, to your point, I think whiskey is a little more interesting than tuna. I don't
know. Unless you're a cat.
That's pretty cool.
Unless you're a cat. What do you think a cat would go
for? You're right.
Yeah.
He's got you there, Liz.
For a scientist, Liz isn't always thinking.
Just coming at it with my perspective. That's all.
Actually, though, think about that, Brent. Think if you did, you saw some kind of anonymous job for a distiller, and then it ended up being vodka. Would you have been as happy, do you think?
No.
I don't know.
Sorry, just a little Fred Minnick coming out there.
So you started in 2005, so you were there near the beginning of the kind of the renaissance of Four Roses, where it's coming out of the doldrums of the previous 40 years of where it was kind of regulated to bottom shelf, at least here in the States. How did the acquisition of by Kieran have the Kieran Brewing Company have on turning things around?
When I started in 2005, they had already come in and done the major things. They brought it back to the U.S. They started to invest money in infrastructure. They, working with Jim, had the vision to expand. So from there, working with them, daily from 2005, the best thing they've done is they've been there for support, both their knowledge and their money. But, they've helped us to build. And the best thing is they understand the value of the tradition of the bourbon, the history, the heritage. And so all of that, they kind of leave that alone. They've never come in to say, wouldn't it be cheaper if we did this? Wouldn't it be easier if we did this? couldn't we make more money if we? They respect, and I think this is the reason they bought the brand. They respect it in Japan. They respect the category. So that part, they kind of leave alone. The rest, they're there for support. Whether looking. I mentioned when I first came to interview, there's a handful of people in management. Now we have dozens of people. We have sales managers around the country. We've added so many people. We've added departments, and we didn't really have the expertise to do that. And so they've supported, they've helped build the brand basically from, like I said, a handful of people. But if you look at the way we were operating as part of Seagram's, we had our warehouse facility and we had the distillery. And all we did at those two locations, at the distillery, we received grain, we milled it, mashed it, distilled it, put it on a truck, and shipped it away. That's all we did. We didn't have human resources. We had production. That was at the warehousing facility. They brought the stuff in. They brought the White Dog in, put it in barrels, put it in the warehouse. They would sample the barrels, send it to Canada where all the blending was done. They would send an order down. They would dump it, put it on a tanker, and it would ship. So that was the base of knowledge we had at those two facilities. We didn't know how to market. We didn't know how to pay people. We didn't know how to order. We didn't do any of that. We just had our specialized manufacturing roles. So that's where Kieran's been so useful in helping to build a full company around just that manufacturing. We knew how to make good bourbon. That was it. We didn't know how to bottle it either. We weren't bottling it.
Sorry.
So a lot of little things behind the scenes that you don't see. I mean, yeah, you found Four Roses on the shelf back then, and it was well blended, or it was barrels were selected properly, and you had good whiskey, whether it was in the U.S. or overseas. But what you don't see is there were so many pieces of that large Seagram's organization that went into making that. And so when we were bought by Kieran, they just bought those two pieces, had to build everything internally to continue what the public saw, the Four Roses that people knew.
Yeah.
I have to say, it still baffles me every time a Japanese company, like Beam Suntory, when they come in and buy a company that makes a handcrafted product, and Americans get concerned that it's going to go to crap. I'm like, these are people who consider guys who make rice a national treasure.
Yeah.
They're going to cheap out on it.
I think they still think Japan just makes those little tin
widget crap
toys out of old tin that still has writing on it from the.
So what you're saying is these are mostly old guys.
Yeah. Boom.
Interesting point, right? And I think back to Japanese culture, and in the spirit of Kaizen, where they want to continuously improve quality improvement. How did that transition look like in terms of the conversation between continuous improvement, a Kaizen culture, versus consistency? How did that relationship play in?
Well, that is interesting because that's really sort of the Seagram's philosophy. They equated quality with consistency.
Yeah. And
of course, Kieran is all about the Kaizen, continuous improvement. And, with the growth, I guess we're always improving, but we're doing it. We're not really thinking about improving. We're just always growing. But it is, we're always trying to do things better, trying to meet that demand, whether it's the expansion, at the warehouse or the bottling facility or the distillery, adding people. So I would say that's the other challenge as an organization that we have is expanding, meeting that demand, but maintaining that level of quality and that consistency.
Sure. Yeah.
And that really goes back to the Seagram's philosophy and the 10 recipe.
Right.
We're using those in combination to be consistent. Of course, we've taken that a step further. We're using those 10 recipes to innovate and create interesting
limited edition.
Yeah.
Which is something to get into a little bit. I mean, I don't know how many folks out there know about the whole Seagram's philosophy and old man Bronfman's a whole idea of mingling various whiskeys. Crown Royal still does the mingling, and Liz can speak to that. And Lou's been on
over 30 different marks.
I represented that brand. Never once did they bring me up there. 14 years. 14 years. I could never cross the cheddar curtain and go north.
It's okay. I was only up there in like November and December. They just set me up.
The best times. Best time of the year to be up in the middle of nowhere.
That's how you earn your stripes.
Mid-March is the worst when the ice starts getting rotten. It's awful.
Oh. God bless. You think of Canada, you think of beautiful green grass and moose.
For 3 months, sure.
So the whole Bronfman thing, which carried over into a number of brands. I mean, Bullet, which was at one point made at Four Roses, really benefited from it. And there's a cone of silence over Diageo. We don't know if they're still doing that anymore. Everyone who knows has been killed. So what's the talk about that? I mean, having the 10 different mash bills, but also constantly improving, you have to stay. Do you try to keep both and stay within the parameters of those 10, but improve upon the 10 mash bills?
The 10 themselves, the challenge is to keep those exactly the way each one's been. You want that flavor profile to be consistent year after year.
As you scale.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And basically what we do, so again, we do it for consistency and for our limited editions. We showcase the 10 recipes by throwing them together in different combinations. And then with new products, like even small batch isn't new, but it's sort of the beginning of that concept of showing what we can do with the different recipes. So that was 2006, and we went to the drawing board and we created a totally new product by using different recipes from the single barrel that's already out on the market, or the Four Roses Bourbon, which is 10 recipes. So small batch we used 4, and then this last year we did small batch select, which is 60 recipes. And so we're trying to convey just how unique we can be and how versatile by using these recipes in different combinations.
Okay. And is that like a lot of your innovation happens on, downstream, as you mentioned? And I think that's right. Yeah, it's, a design of experiments. There are endless ways we can, sort of match these up, especially when you talk about, barrel to barrel differences, year to year differences. Have you guys ever considered, or, I don't know if you can share, thinking about doing any innovation upstream as well?
Yeah, we've talked about that. And I've always, felt that I get asked a lot, what my goal is, or what, especially when I first was named Master Distiller, what do you want to do to really make your mark?
Yeah.
Like, I just don't want to break this thing, for one. I want to, I want to just maintain what we're doing. And fortunately or unfortunately, we didn't have any capacity to do anything than just what we were doing, just to try to maintain, keep up. And even then it was hard. It's still hard to keep up with demand.
Yeah.
So that's why. So we're expanding. And we just finished an expansion at the distillery a few years ago at the bottling facility. We're always adding stuff. So all of our capacity has been 100% used just for the demand. And all that growth is here in the U.S. So we haven't really had the luxury of sitting back and saying, what would be fun? What could we try differently? But at the same time, we haven't had to, because we have 10 recipes. So we can help innovate and create exciting products.
Built-in innovation.
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh,
built-in innovation. But yeah,
you can keep that. You can keep that.
Like that. So, but yeah, we talk about the possibility of different mash bills, or exploring different yeast strains, or rye whiskey, but we don't have any solid plans right now to do any of that. But now that we have that extra capacity, because we do have 24 more fermenters online, we have an extra.
Wow.
We're not having to use all that just yet.
Okay.
If you look at whiskey sales, we're growing steadily, but we completed the expansion last year. we know that 6 years from now, when that whiskey, that bourbon's old enough to be used, we're not going to double our sales in 1 year. So we didn't turn on both stills full blast as soon as that was all complete. We're kind of easing into it.
Right.
So we do have a little bit of excess capacity.
Ebb and flow.
Yeah. Now we don't have a lot of free time, any of us, but we do have.
Right.
So if we can find some time and get together and work out a plan, then it is something that I know we've talked about. Something we would like to do. Something that would be interesting to explore.
Okay. And
so,
for in the future,
fermentation was the bottleneck. You got plenty of distillation capacity. Is that what I'm hearing?
That was balanced so well under Seagram's, like the number of fermenters, the still, all that was balanced perfectly. So when we expanded, we basically doubled everything. So there's of the two, one isn't a bottleneck over the other. They're pretty much together. As a system, it can be a bottleneck to something else. But right now, there's no bottleneck on that end at all. Production.
Okay.
In 6 years, we might hit that ceiling again. Have to add another 24 fermenter system and another 48 inch still. But right now, there will be a next bottleneck, but that's not the next one.
Okay. We actually had a question, if that's okay. If you're good with some questions from the audience right now.
Sure.
We had a question come in from Jeremy D.
Jeremy
D. Okay.
Well known.
How often do you usually taste the barrels that are destined to be single barrel selects before you know they are ready? Is it once you know it's ready, or do you taste and decide they have to age longer? And then there's another question that you probably might not be able to answer, but also, how do we get more single barrel selections in Wisconsin? So apparently there's quite a demand in our friends up north.
One more whiskey.
Yeah, those have gotten really popular. If for anyone doesn't know, that's the barrel strength single barrel. We have our standard 100 proof single barrel, which is always the high rye mash bill with the big yeast. Very consistent, 7 to 8, 9 years of age. The private barrels can be all 10 recipes, and their barrel strength 8 to 12 years, so a little bit older. For those, it's sort of the same process as single barrels. First, identifying the batches that fit that profile. Well, that's single barrels fitting the profile. Private selections can fit the profile, kind of be outside the profile, very interesting. Basically, that's just picking the batches that I feel would be really appealing to consumers, put in the program. And sometimes those get earmarked at 4 years of age, and then I'll look at them again at 7 years. Sometimes they're ready to be used at 8. Sometimes we've already got a good batch in there.
Do you ever earmark on the distillate level?
No.
Okay.
No.
I like how you touched your ear when you talked. Do you ever earmark? Do you ever look at the barrel? Or smell the whiskey? Do you ever? This is very hands-on.
Tactile.
Yeah, very
tactile. Use all the sensory tools at your disposal. So I had a follow-up question. Now that we're talking, production a little bit, getting into the weeds. So, certainly managing a 10 mark blend has its challenges. Everything from raw material selection to yeast management to production planning, cost, right? Cask management. What are some of the biggest challenges, or maybe the biggest challenge that you face and your team faces with managing that?
Probably the biggest, and I think everyone struggles with forecasting, especially now.
Yeah.
Nobody had any idea, where this industry would be in the last 5 years. With us, and everyone has their challenges, but for us, because each product is forecasted individually, and we produce every year based on that forecast, we break that down, of course, account for evaporation, but we also look at the recipes that are needed to meet that forecast. So by nature, forecast isn't going to be correct. But then with ours, it might not even be correct in the ratio of small batch for small batch. So, and we made the recipes to those requirements 6-7 years in the future. So that makes it a little more difficult. So we typically try to add some buffer into the production. Fortunately, with that extra production, those can be used for if there's a buffer somewhere, some excess, those barrels can be used in the private barrel program, set aside to age longer for limited editions. So that's the upside. But the downside of that too is if, like small batch, that has sold way more than we had budgeted.
Yeah.
And so if you look at our private barrel program, there are a few recipes that are a little more scarce than the others. And the reason is those are recipes used in small batch.
In small batch. But is that almost a little bit, to an extent, the appeal of them, right? There's a limited quantity and we baked, in for this amount of production. And if that's what it is, that's great. But if there's higher demand, then we can supply. I don't know, Lou, what do you think about that? Is that...
I always worry about the whole, I'm taking it in a completely different direction. Sorry, because this is what I was thinking while you were talking about. Is this cutting the heart out of things? Is that part of the predictive bit too? Like we can only take so many of these private barrel programs before we start cutting into muscle. And because here's the thing. We used to talk about this back in the late 90s and early aughts, and, with all the small batch stuff, is that going to be cutting the heart out of, just for example, Jim Beam Black or Knob Creek? And, I'm obviously just using one distillery here, but, it happened, or at least it looks like it happened. And now I'm talking to the people at various distilleries, and they're saying, yeah, it's a problem. We're having to recalibrate. And I'm sure a lot of it is the ridiculously wonderful growth. But forecasting must just have you blowing your brains out.
Yeah.
Sorry, I went way off on that, Liz. I apologize.
That's okay.
I like how it got suicidal there too, Lou.
Yeah,
That's that you're blowing your brains out. You must be hanging yourself from the distillery rafters.
So is that an issue, or is that? It's just something you have to compensate for?
It's something you deal with, and fortunately, I don't deal with the forecasting, but I do have to sort of.
You lucky man.
Shore up the mess. When things don't end up exactly the way they're supposed to be. But the way, as far as cutting the heart out of other products, like if, for example, if we decided that we were going to prioritize the private barrel program, and we were going to ensure that we had enough of, say, those 2 recipes that are using small batch that we're short on in the program, if we said, okay, we're just going to pull those out and make sure we're going to prioritize the private barrel program, then we wouldn't do that, because that would cut the heart out of small batch. And so that's just one example of how all this stuff sort of interplays. And that's what really goes on behind the scenes, to try to make sure that every product is maintained and we don't cut the heart out of it. And that's really, I think, where that private barrel program and those batches that we set aside for limited editions, that kind of helps buffer that effect.
Oh.
We make extra, the overflow can be pulled and set aside for those products. And if it were the other way around, if that were the priority, that would be pulling more. But we're limited there. So we have the priorities, the standard products. That's where the batches end up first. Not only because it's a priority, but also because it's more immediate. So if there's a 6-year-old batch of OBSO, for example, and we're short on that in small batch, we're going to go ahead and use that in small batch. And it's going to be depleted before it reaches 8 years old, where it could have been used for a limited, or not a private selection.
Wow.
That's what
it's sort of natural how it works, but it still takes a lot of finagling and planning.
I say you take out the barrels you don't need or want, you put them in a little faux rick house. There, people go in because this is the rick house where we keep the best, and we're going to let you pick through it. But it's actually
I thought you were going to say, like, you can just send it to Marty Duffy at
I'll get rid of those excess ones for you. I'll take care of that.
I'll sell those for you.
It's for Glencairn testing. Like we're doing some beta testing.
Each glass is tested before it goes out on the market by me. 25 million glasses I have to test.
We want to make sure the volatiles. Oh, go ahead, Lou.
No, I had a more philosophical question, and I don't know, maybe it's 20 of. I can ask this question. I'm thinking it might be too early in the show, but we're in the shank of it now. Yeah,
go for it.
So
get out, Socrates.
I know I'm getting overthinking here. So Jim, especially like I think in the last 2 or 3 years of his tenure there as master distiller, became kind of a defender of bourbon, and made some public statements about defending the definition of bourbon. And I think that, I mean, from what you've been saying about the, sticking to the 10 recipes, that sounds like it's important to Four Roses in general. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, the 10 recipes, that's the core of what we do. But we could innovate out. But I think what you're getting at, I know at the time, like right in that 2012, 2015, you're getting a lot of flavored whiskeys on the market.
Yeah.
And I know Jim was being asked about that a lot. And
that couldn't have gone over well.
Yeah, so I know. So he was defending, and he had nothing nice to say about flavored whiskeys. So I don't think it's a personal insult to bourbon, but
I would have thought he'd been appalled.
But the reason I know that I was, he was on the road a lot, traveling, talking to people, and when I started doing that in 2015, after I stepped into this role, people asked me that for about the first year. They'd be like, "Do you feel like Jim does, about the flavored whiskeys? Like, how do you feel about it?" And they're like, "Oh, So he'd go out on the road, and he was really, I don't know if he was really so much bashing the flavored whiskeys, or saying, that's not bourbon. Bourbon is this, and that's, I don't know exactly. But I know he was defending straight bourbon whiskey, and I heard a lot about that, or got a lot of the echoes of that when I started talking to people after they had talked to Jim, like in 2016, 2017.
Yeah, well, on top of that, so that's that'd be good for these questions here. So, what we got here?
Yes.
John Fisher asks Brent, where are American tastes going in whiskey? Higher congeners, older, more flavors? Thanks, he says. Which is weird, though. I gotta say, flavored whiskey? Doesn't whiskey already have a flavor? Isn't whiskey a flavor?
It's whiskey flavored, by God.
You're not the target demographic.
I'm not?
That's true, too.
I've never have been. It's really sad. Or anything. So, So where do you think it's going in your opinion?
It's hard to really pick a direction. I can tell you, the consumer now wants to try different things. They want to diversify, see what every facility. I would say that I think distillers are probably the happiest people about the increase in popularity, apart from the obvious reasons. But just take us for example. We got these warehouses, all these recipes. 20 years ago, we would just pull them out and put out basically one product. But we knew we had these special barrels, these special blends. There's nowhere we could take them. There was no release for them. Unless you worked in the distillery and we make you hear. I wasn't there at that time. Just imagining the way it was. So all these were in there, all these special barrels, these special batches. But the only way the public saw them was just to dump them in mass, put them in that mass-produced, 2 or 3 different labels that any distiller produced, and that was it. So in our case, we haven't done anything different, except now we're able to dig a little bit deeper and sort of showcase all those unique barrels, those unique batches, put them together in a different way. And I think that's what people want to see. They want to just glimpse behind the curtain and try these different variations. But it does seem like people are looking more towards high proof, older whiskey. It seems like it's actually kind of working the opposite way. It seems like when I started, everyone was under that illusion that without doubt, age equated to quality. Yeah. And there are certainly some great older whiskeys, but I think a lot of people now talk to somebody like, I don't like stuff over 12 years, 15 years.
Yeah, I think that's crested. I think you're right.
Yeah. I think people started understanding, especially with American whiskey, especially with bourbon whiskey, that there's a sweet spot and it isn't. And because they now understand, bourbon is brand new oak, so
yeah, exactly.
Other whiskeys are used bourbon barrels, so they can afford to go older. But younger whiskeys. Yeah,
I think that's probably. Sorry, I'm agreeing with you, Marty. Right. I'm excited about that because you brought up an interesting point. And that's probably where a part of the consumer perception came, is just spilling over from the Scotch.
Oh yeah,
from single malt Scotch. You're like, 18-year-old, like that's a good Scotch. And you're like, 18-year-old bourbon, I don't know about that.
So much.
I used to have consumers come up to me and they'd brag about it. They say, I never drink anything under 18 years of age. And I think, you're an idiot. What's the matter with you? Nothing under 18 years of age. There's lots of really great whiskey. There's more great whiskey younger than 18 than there is over 18, in my opinion.
Good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah.
I think back to the question, I think education and transparency and innovation, I think, has helped consumer trends as well.
But now, don't you think innovation, and Brent, this is something, so many brands, that's what innovation can also be a marketing term where you come out with yet another, some kind of quirky little, either a finish, or you come out with a flavoring, a flavored whiskey. Smirnoff, for instance, comes out with another, not that there's a big clamor for clam flavored vodka or.
You'd be surprised that,
we gotta stay all right down here for clam.
Mix that with a shot of horseradish flavored vodka. I'm in, baby.
All right, birthday cake or cotton candy flavored
some
vodka.
green olive brine.
We got that. There's lots of that, actually.
Innovation. That demographic thing again.
Not in the bourbon, though. That's what you do. Play around with a little brine, olive brine in your bourbon. Put that out, and it's a dirty Manhattan. How about that?
Well, there's pickleback.
Pickleback? Oh, you mean
Brent,
with Irish?
Please, God, stop them.
Okay, so
too entertaining.
We have some other questions as well. So should we dig into some of those?
Yes.
We'll part B the brine conveation.
Phil Albee,
there are more questions.
From Mr. Albee, my favorite playwright. Liz, are you going to
asks
our shortest question ever?
Yes, so the word goes to you, and the question is aging, controlled climate? Question mark.
Beautiful and its
do we do that?
Yeah, do you? Or would you, if you could?
We don't. A lot of whiskeys that are very good that are controlled. We don't. We do open our windows in the warehouses in the summer. Somewhat controlled like that.
That's a little old-timey control. That's how they control the climate back in the old days.
Jimmy Russell always says that. Climate controlled. We open the windows in April and we close them in October.
But
process standardization.
So I've never really seen firsthand, like an experiment of climate controlled whiskey versus not. So I don't know. We don't do that.
But you do use the single floor warehouses, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're trying to keep a consistent climate.
Yeah, I guess that's controlled too, because if the multi-tiered warehouses, you get such a variation.
Gradients.
With the single story, it's very little. It's very consistent from the first barrel to the 6th barrel up.
Cement floors or earthen floors?
Earthen.
Earthen.
Really? I did not know that.
Dunnage, yeah, that's.
They are wooden ricks, though, right? They're not metal.
Okay.
Yeah, I've heard bad things about metal ricks. Profane things, actually.
Really? I mean, I've heard that too. I mean, I've heard that, but I never heard what the problem was.
Well, one of the problems I heard was rust, and another one I heard was sparks.
Mm-hmm.
Parts?
Yeah.
Parts?
Sparks.
Oh.
Yeah. That would be a
biggie.
Why risk it?
A big safety issue.
That's right.
High proof.
Brent, you never have to worry about your rickhouse collapsing.
I mean,
over metal, that doesn't sound good.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Jeremy D says, thanks for the answer. I would have never known to correlate the availability of those barrels with how the batched products are selling. So, says
that's why we're here.
I'm Jeremy D.
Big old sip of knowledge, baby. Big old sip.
Go ahead. Sorry, there were some other questions.
Did you want me to? That Monique question there. I always get the Monique question
in. Got to get Monique in. She was just adding to the conversation around the age. She said 50-year-old Scotch, same issue, all oak and tannin usually. So.
All oak and tannin. I thought she was going to say like all oak, no tannin.
None of the guilt.
No. All flesh, no fury.
I had my last technical question, if I may, before we jump into the last question or whatever these fine gentlemen may want to ask.
This is the nerd corner.
So, distiller to distiller, I always like to say that, we don't actually make whiskey, right? Yeast make whiskey. Our friend Saccharomyces cerevisiae makes whiskey. So, as master yeast shepherder of Four Roses, which is your favorite? Do you have a favorite yeast?
Liz uses this question in bars to pick up guys.
Works like a charm.
That's tough. I'm not trying to dodge the question. I really don't have one that is consistently my favorite. They all exist. Seagram's had 350 plus yeast strains in their library.
Over 2,000.
We held on to 5 when we got split apart, for a reason. Those 5, each serves its purpose. Each one's very good on its own. They're just very different. And I'll say at different ages, I might have different, I have different impressions of the different yeast strains. For example, like at 14, 15 years old, I probably like the K's and the V's.
Okay.
At 6 and 7 years old, maybe I really like the O's. The F's are pretty consistent. I like those at all ages. So I don't know. I'm not going to drag you on along too long with that, but I don't really have one just favorite yeast strain.
That's fair. It's like picking your favorite child. I get it.
Yeah.
Publicly, at least.
Liz has little tubes of yeast on the pillow next to her when she goes to bed. All her favorite yeast. Instead of dolls or teddy bears, it's little yeast.
No, it's funny. Actually, I have a whole collection of stuffed they're stuffed microbes. I don't know, Brent, have you seen these?
Stuffed microbes?
People think I'm joking when I call her a nerd. She's
wow.
Wow.
Anyway.
My favorite microbe is...
Liz, do you have a favorite? I know you've worked with them. Do you have a favorite of?
Yeah. I mean, similar to you, right? Like to your point. I actually had the privilege of working through the rest of that collection. So over 2,000 yeast strains in that Seagram's collection. Yeah, and I would say there were some in that collection that I really had. Either they're exciting profiles or they had an exciting, like Marty, this is all up your alley, but they had an exciting backstory in terms of, where they used to be distilled at that are now defunct distilleries. So I think digging into that, there were some strains that were a little more interesting than others, but yeah, to your point, it's hard to pick.
Yeah.
Wonderful world of yeast. Never let Liz in your kitchen if you're baking bread, because all of a sudden the bread just gets enormous just from all the yeast coming off her clothing. Hey, we have a question from John Fisher, the Fisher King. What about woods? What about woods? Are American tastes seeking new woods like Garyana, or are you doing any experimentation with woods? Thanks.
Yeah, we're not. I do think it's interesting, though. That's something we could possibly do in the future. I kind of take the lead of Scotch. I've probably tasted more Scotch whiskeys finished in different oaks than I have bourbons, but I've tasted ones from each that I've really enjoyed. Again, it kind of goes back to innovation. I think that there's a big spectrum of innovation where you go so far you start getting almost into gimmicky and doesn't really not too meaningful. But I think oak finish or different wood finishes, I think that's really interesting innovation. That as far as a lot of the different things that different distilleries are doing now, trying different mash bills or fermentation profiles, but that's something I would like to explore is trying Four Roses in different wood. But we aren't doing that currently.
The Irish are exploring more of the Hungarian oak. You have a number of distilleries using from the Tokai forest, and that wood has an amazing aromatic smell. It smells like a kitchen at Christmas time. And I got to choose a lot in wine.
Not to do it again, but the Spanish oak and that is just amazing. Yeah. Really,
well, cheers to that.
Blown up. Yeah.
What are you drinking? Is that new make?
As far as you know.
No, you know me. I've got my club soda. I'm over here.
Well, this is just a little country club woman just waiting to happen. I have some club soda with a lime. Hey, Brent, I had a question for you. Since you are following Jim Rutledge, you are walking in his footprints. Now, after 5 years, they're really your footprints now. But still, he did 50 years. You don't want to, just do, I'm going to do 20 years, then retire. No, you got to outdo him. So I'm thinking if you started in 2005, that means you have to work at least till 2056. Are you ready for that?
By my calculations, yeah, that's right.
On that glide path.
I mean, would you be do you plan on staying with it, until they drag you away?
Very likely. It is something I love that much. And as long as I can keep doing it and keep enjoying it, yeah, as long as they'll have me, I'll keep doing it. Absolutely.
See, that has to be, that does become a dream job. If it's something you're comfortable with, you love it. And then those distilleries are always in such beautiful locations, either in Kentucky or Ireland or Scotland. That's the first thing that comes to my mind when I go to those distilleries is, oh my God, you get to come here every day? Yeah, this is beautiful. This is just, you can walk out there with your bag lunch and just go, I run this shit. This place is mine.
Yeah, sitting down at my desk is like the same feeling. That's
well, when I worked in Ireland at James's Gate, I'm walking through James's Gate every day.
That's pretty nice.
That's going on me. But the only thing is, that's just a gate. Then I went into a prefab building. That's kind of awesome. Right. But you're working at a distillery where there's aromas and there might even be horses out in the fields or something.
Yeah, we had at Shelbyville. I liked seeing the wild turkey just kind of hanging about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. What's your favorite part of the distillery itself? Of just coming to work and what do you love about it? Just looking at it and whatever, or the aromas, or
I think it's all that whole package. It just kind of comes together. The smells, the buildings, it all just kind of gives you that. And it wasn't really even built as a show place. When it has that Spanish mission style, it was really just a functional distillery. But we have put some, just naturally it's beautiful. But we've tried, we have the visitors experience now. So we have a visitor center and we have the grounds are more manicured and it's beautiful. So I think just the whole ambiance, there's not, I can say, I like the rose bushes. I like the smell. I like the main distillery building. But I think it all kind of comes together. gives you that Four Roses impression. It's nice.
Speaking of Four Roses, and now you'll notice Mr. Bryson is the fifth rose. I was doing a little research, and it seems that when the new company came on, they didn't really incorporate what was considered before then, I guess, the real founding of the brand and the original distillery with what was his name, Rufus Rose, and his brother and two sons, and that was the Four Roses. But do you have any idea why they thought, we'll go with this other beginning, which I guess was just as legit, but it didn't have anything to do with the name.
Yeah, I think Al Young dug into that. I think that was one of his tasks when he was writing the book. We needed a story, and you're right, there were kind of two conflicting stories as to where the name began. If you go back, 1888 was when the name was trademarked, so it's hard to find documentation that far back. But we found documentation supporting kind of both. But ultimately, there was more substance to the story that you read on the back of the Four Roses Bourbon bottle. The Paul Jones Jr. and the engagement to the lovely bride who wore the Four Roses. That was so. But there's evidence, for both sides of that story. It's probably somewhere in the middle, and we'll never know. I'm sure that there's probably some business association there between Rufus Rose and Paul Jones Jr. We know there was. We just don't know to what degree, and who sold who what, and we probably will never know.
Kind of like bourbon itself. We'll probably never know.
Yeah. That's actually the fun of whiskey history, is that so much of it is clouded in time.
Give you a chance to drink a few and argue about it, which I find happens a lot.
Well, and you can argue.
Discuss.
Yeah.
And it actually takes this out of the equation, because you can argue about it, and even if you were to look it up on your phone in a bar, it doesn't matter. There'd be at least with Four Roses, a guy would look up. No, it's Rufus. It's Rufus Rose and his brother and two kids. No, it's not, because I got another website that says something else. See, that's fun. That's great.
It is fun.
And then the one last thing that I wanted to bring up was some of the brands that have come out of Four Roses over the year. I mean, I was really surprised about Eagle Rare. I wasn't aware of that was originally a Four Roses brand.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then in the late 80s, Sazerac bought it up. Which is interesting, because did they buy it from Seagram's? Was that being made? Was that just a brand that was being sourced out of Four Roses? Do you know anything about that, Brent?
My best guess, which is probably right, I think those were owned by Seagram's, Eagle Rare, and I tried some old Henry McKenna too.
Wow,
brand too. Both those were made at the Lawrenceburg facility. But when they were sold, when I don't know.
See, that's interesting. Just because I didn't think Seagram's would let those go. I thought Seagram's was holding on to all their brands, and it wasn't until Seagram's was dissolved and became parts of Pernod and
they probably weren't mingled enough, so they wouldn't want that.
Yeah, not enough mingling.
Not enough mingling.
I wonder if Sam Bronfman liked to mingle himself. And he's just like, this would work in a whiskey. I've talked to 9 other people tonight. This might work good to mingle. Now, are you
just recognizing? Yeah, just recognizing that other people have attributes that complement yours, Marty. Just like whiskey.
This is starting to sound like the Richard Patterson method of blending, isn't it? Doesn't he always talk about that?
What?
Blending is like a cocktail party?
I have no idea. I just made
yeah. He's talking about this. I'll invite some of these guys. And I'll invite the supermodel, and I'll invite a biker, and eventually you have an interesting party.
Yeah, you're a little spicy. You're a little fruity. Bada bing, bada boom.
Who's he calling fruity? What the heck? Some guy, poor guy. What was the thing last Saturday? There was another thing I was going to mention. There was something else.
Jeez.
I mean, well, there was something but Liz came up with the
particularly pithy nerd thing. Is that what you're saying? Oh, well, it's her job.
Oh, well, here, Brent. This is what I want to ask. What do you have on the? Is there anything on the horizon that people should be looking out for?
No, last year we did the small batch select. Every year we do the limited edition small batch. We just released that for this year. So for next year, we'll be doing next year's small batch limited edition, and we'll be going to more states with the small batch select. But there's no new product in the works or anything that I'm keeping from you, anything exciting.
Hey, expansion of coverage is good. Bigger, more markets is a good thing.
Yeah. We're just taking baby steps. If you look at, it was 2006 the last time we introduced a new product to our permanent lineup.
Wow.
2006 all the way to 2019, between small batch and small batch select. So we're not just trying to throw things out just because we can. We're trying to take our time and try to do it right.
It's funny. I hear people complain about all other distilleries not doing that. Like, why don't they do it? Never hear anybody complain about it with Four Roses. I think they're just. I think you're hitting that spot. Doing interesting things with what you have, like you said.
Well,
built-in innovation.
Yeah, what'd you call it?
Built-in innovation.
Built-in innovation, yeah.
Or just built innovation.
Four Roses is also just a really good bourbon at a really affordable price.
Yes.
And I think that's the real beauty of it. I mean, it's just high enough. The image is there that when people get a bottle, they go, wow, that's nice. But at the same
that was something I wanted to ask. I'm sorry, but Yellow Label, is it? It's not even called Yellow. Is that still being made?
Yeah.
The 80 proof?
Yeah. It's just Four Roses Bourbon.
Okay.
People still call it Yellow Label. It's the same liquid, just different package, and the label isn't yellow anymore, so people aren't as inclined to call it Yellow Label.
Sure.
Well, I would be just to be ornery. But, that was no, I shouldn't say it. The first time I had Four Roses was at a frat party back in the 80s, so we won't talk about that. But
and Lou was in college.
Pretty sure that bottle didn't come in from Japan. No, the first one I had was a bottle of Yellow Label at the distillery at my first Kentucky Bourbon Fest, and it was the year you started back. It still had Japanese characters on the back. They had to bring it in, but I remember. Somebody poured me about 4 fingers of that in a glass full of ice. It was one of those really, really hot bourbon festivals. In fact, that was when I met Al Young. We're walking around the distillery, and he and I got out ahead of the rest of the group, and we're just kind of pausing there, sitting, leaning up against the thing, wiping sweat off our heads, and Al just says, why the hell can't we do this in November? And that was my introduction to Al.
Actually, that reminds me. So the Kentucky Bourbon Festival is taking place virtually this week. Yeah, this weekend.
Wow.
So it's all, please go online.
Yeah, I ought to know that.
Support. Is Four Roses going to be involved, Brent?
Yeah, I filmed a few segments that'll be aired, and I couldn't tell exactly when, but sometime this week.
Okay.
So that was our involvement. It's much different this year.
Right.
Like everything else, we're doing our best. But
well, what about the distillery itself? Are you guys open? Can people visit?
You can come visit, but it's retail only. We're not doing tours yet.
Oh. Yeah. Well, you could get a bunch of 6-foot poles and just have people hold them between each other and just have them walk around, couldn't you?
That worked for us. I remember we went on a tour with a bunch of really tall Czechs, so it was kind of the same thing.
I was in Prague once and finished lunch, and I kept on asking for a Czech, and then I finally realized, oh my God, that must be really insulting. I swear to God.
Did anyone bounce?
There is
bouncing Czechs.
A link below. If you want to learn more about Four Roses, visit their website. I'm guessing there might be some links to some of the Kentucky Bourbon Festival segments you did maybe on the website as well?
Probably. If not there, definitely on the Kentucky Bourbon Festival website.
Okay.
Yeah, we probably have them on the Four Roses website too.
Cool. Yeah, link is right below. You can give it
a you're doing it, right, Brent?
What's that?
You're doing the segments
yourself? Yeah, one on like the history of Four Roses, sort of a resurrection piece. It was there with 1792. We were both talking about
cool.
The brands, and then another one on mingling.
Nice. Yes. It's the irony of
like
virtual learning. Yeah, not mingling, talking about mingling.
The discussion of mingling in the days of non-mingling.
Oh, wow, that's ironic.
Yeah. Aww. See, more reasons why people should go out and get Four Roses whiskey, so you have mingling in a bottle. People you can drink your mingling as opposed to actually
drink your mingling.
Yeah.
Drink your mingling.
Sorry, I
don't know where that came from.
These are good, Marty.
What, Brent?
These are some good marketing ideas.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Mingling in a bottle, built-in innovation. I'm telling you.
I'm doing lifesavers off the Titanic here. You just
taking good notes here.
Should we, before we go, should we mention our guest for next week?
Is who, Liz?
I believe it is the Todd Leopold.
It is Todd.
Yeah. The Leopold brothers in Colorado. Yes, Todd will be our guest.
The man who runs the three-chambered still.
Yeah, a man who's doing amazing stuff out there. Brent, you obviously are getting a beautiful set of your own personalized Glencairn glasses.
Thank you.
Courtesy
Look forward to those.
And of course, signed. I think it's going to be 25 signed copies. Courtesy of Lou.
Hey, 5 or 10 will be fine, Lou.
Yeah, he has a whole wall of these built.
I will have to pick that up.
Well, his book tastings had to be canceled because of COVID. So he but
good first burgers.
If anybody is down in beautiful Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, please stop in at the Four Roses.
Four Roses, not Wild Turkey. I hear there's some misunderstanding there sometimes.
Is there?
No, go to both. Go to both.
And oddly, there was wild turkeys over by Liz at Shelbyville.
Yeah. Kentucky.
Yeah.
Kentucky.
All right. Well,
thank you.
It was so cool. Thank you so much.
Episodes are available. You can rewatch this, try to decipher what was actually said on YouTube. So please go ahead and watch past episodes. In the meantime, share them. Until then, Brent, be good. Happy.
Thanks so much, Brent.
Take care, guys.
Cheers, everyone.
Enjoy your whiskey.
Cheers.